Can you break bad habits without using willpower? That's what we're going to be talking about on today's episode of the show. I'm Simon Mitchell, online body transformation coach, founder of I Am Paradise Fitness. Welcome to this episode of the podcast. If you are listening on a podcast platform, awesome. If you are watching on YouTube, also equally awesome. Don't forget, like, subscribe, rate, review the show. That would be absolutely awesome. Now, the concepts and the ideas for this episode of the show are from a book called The Little Book of Big Change, which I will put a link to in the show notes below, so that if you're interested in finding out more, maybe reading the full text, you can absolutely 100% do that. Now, this podcast is really just my interpretations of just some of the concepts within that book. So it's by no means a complete and comprehensive summary. There are bits that I've not included, bits I've skipped over, and bits that I have taken and really kind of put my own little spin on it, just so that I can try and make it as relevant to you as possible within the context of health and fitness. So with that caveat in place, we're going to dissect some of the principles to help you really kind of break through that barrier when it comes to the thoughts, the urges that you have that you may be feeling take you off track right now. Maybe you haven't got control of your cravings, your hunger. Maybe you're not feeling motivated to go to the gym. All of these different thoughts of feelings, these urges kind of compound over time and take you off course when it comes to trying to achieve your goals. And often you resort to willpower, trying to do something, forcing yourself to do something, willing yourself not to eat your body weight in donuts each and every day. But that willpower only seems to last for so long before it doesn't really do the trick anymore. So what we're going to do is now explore some of those concepts, and hopefully you can link this with the other episodes that I've done in the past around James Clear's Atomic Habits, so you can really combine these different thought processes and ideas together to give you some really, really useful insights in how to break those bad habits and build good ones. When it comes to thoughts, urges, and bad habits, we always try to use a little bit of willpower to try and get us over that line, to get us to change that habit. We try to resist, ignore all of these different thoughts that pop into our head consistently, sometimes repeatedly, daily, sometimes even multiple times per day. We're always trying to fend off and have this battle, this war with our minds. But often when you get into that situation where you're telling yourself not to think about something, all you can do is think about that thing. And the more you try and resist, the more you try and ignore, the worse that feeling gets. And I can give you an example of that right now. So if I told you to close your eyes right now, and don't think of a pink elephant. Really don't think about a huge, giant, pink pachyderm right in your mind. You just really concentrate on not thinking about that at all whatsoever. Do not think under any circumstances about a pink elephant. Don't imagine it in your mind's eye. Don't imagine it at the forefront of your brain. Do not imagine that pink elephant. What do you imagine? What do you see right now? You see a pink elephant, right? And it's the same thing when it comes to your habits and the things that you're trying to change in your life, the negative things or the things that you perceive to be negative. If you're always saying, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, that you immediately want to do that. So if it's coming from a point of view of you don't really want to have all those temptations of maybe you're at work and there's lots of treats and cakes and things like that, and you become overly tempted and you overconsume and you're trying not to do that. But as soon as you start putting those feelings of don't into your mind, that's what starts to cause some problems. And if you don't go down the route of trying not to think about something, often you'll try and replace that thought, that idea, that urge with something else, something positive. But this also has a little bit of a negative mindset approach, because it's training you to think that your original thought is a bad thought and you're trying to replace it with a good thought. Now, this is a bit like when it comes to food, thinking about certain foods as good foods, certain food as bad foods. You create these camps and you destroy your relationship with food, and you become overly obsessed with good foods and you punish yourself for having bad foods and things like that. And it's never going to be the right way to approach your nutrition. And the same thing comes to these thoughts. All these thoughts are natural. Thoughts and urges are natural human emotions. So we don't want to really think about them as good and bad. We don't want to give them that power that they are good or they are bad. It's really your action. What action do you take based on the thoughts and urges that pop into your head? That's what either generates a desired outcome or a less desirable outcome. So it's less about the thought itself and more about the action you take based on that thought. Now, in the book, Amy Johnson, who's the author, talks about thoughts being like an alarm clock. An alarm clock does what you tell it. If you set your alarm to go off at 6 a.m., it will go off at 6 a.m. If you forget to change it because it's the weekend, it goes off at 6 a.m. It does what you tell it. And if maybe you've changed shifts at work and now you can have a lie-in, if you didn't change it, it goes off at 6 a.m. If you get frustrated with it, you rip it out the wall and you throw it across the room, it's just doing what you told it to do. And it's a bit like your thoughts. You have complete control to reprogram the way you think about the thoughts that pop into your head. So you can reprogram that thought alarm clock so that it doesn't generate those feelings, those actions that are there right now. And as we'll go through in a second, we'll dive into some of those tactics about how you can really start to reprogram that mind. And it won't be something that happens overnight. It's going to be something you're going to need to work at, and that's okay. You won't be absolutely 100% as soon as you've listened to this podcast. You're now going to reprogram your mind and you're not going to think about various different bad habits you've got or various different negative thoughts you have. That's not going to happen. It's something you're going to have to work at, but those urges and those thoughts do fade over time if you're persistent with it. So you really have to learn that these thoughts, these urges are always going to be there to some degree, much less so once you've got a kind of grip of things, but they're always going to be these passing thoughts at a certain point in time. But really, they don't have any power. That thought on its own doesn't have any power. You control all of the power because it is your action that really determines what happens. The thought itself is nothing. It's what action you take based upon that thought. For example, another analogy used in the book is that if you've got someone in the back seat of a car and you're driving and they tell you to run a red light, chances are you're not going to listen to them because you're in control of that vehicle. You're looking at the dangers, you're making the logical decisions. And that is a part of your brain that is just assessing that situation and making that judgment call. And it's a bit like the thought to go and eat your body weight in donuts is the guy in the back seat of the car screaming at you. Whereas you need to then try and engage that logical side of your brain, that decision-making side of your brain, to really not give that thought the power that it wants and not take over and lead you down a path that's going to have your body weight in donuts. That's not what you maybe want right now when it comes to your health and fitness. So the key question is, how do we now break down these bad habits and start to change that thought process and that thought behavior? Well, the first thing to do is to really recognize what thoughts are constantly coming into your mind that aren't aligned with where you want to go in terms of your health, your fitness, or whatever it may be. What is your thought playlist that you need to get in tune with? What are those thoughts that always keep coming into your head? So write them down, reflect on them, really think about listing out what are those thoughts and urges that you want to try and change, or you at least want to try and dismiss and make them fade into the background. When you start to know what they are, then you can kind of recognize when they come and you can start to deal with them. Which then leads us on to point number 2, which is how do you feel? How do you feel when those thoughts and those urges pop into your brain? How do you feel? Do you feel happy, sad? All these different things, probably not going to feel happy, I would imagine. But recognize those feelings as well, because if you've got a list of those emotions and you've got a list of those feelings, you can start to marry the two together to say, well, when I feel like this and I've got this thought in my head, I know that this is one of those thoughts and urges that I need to work on. And you acknowledge it, you accept it, and now you're in a position of power to start to deal with it. And that's where the third and final point comes in. And this is your conscious pause. It's that point at which you recognize that same thought You recognize the feeling, and now you hit the pause button. You hit the pause button to say, right, now I'm not going to take the usual action that I take. That bus does not lead me in the direction that I want to go in. So that conscious pause, that conscious stop to make now that logical decision, that engage the other part of your brain, not necessarily be overrode by emotions, thoughts, and feelings. You're now consciously putting the stop on that. You're consciously pressing the pause button, and now you're course correcting, because as it's described in the book, this is your choice point. The choice where you decide to obey and give in to the thought, or you decide not to. You decide to go down the path that you want to go down. You use that information that you've gathered about how you feel, what you're thinking, you've recognized, you've hit pause, and now you're deciding to consciously go in a different direction that is aligned to your long-term goal. So hopefully this podcast, this little insight into this book gave you some thoughts. Maybe it even just got you to stop and think about how you approach your various different habits, you approach your process of trying to change those habits, and maybe you stop using willpower to try and do it. Now, I would really recommend that if you haven't done so already, you go back and listen or watch the episode on Atomic Habits, which is a book by James Clear. And I really think that these two processes married together would really work and be really powerful, because let's face it, you don't necessarily need more knowledge when it comes to nutrition. You can make a lot of progress by just focusing on a calorie deficit. All the other stuff that you get embroiled in, you're interested in, is great, because yes, there is lots of things you can learn about nutrition and further your knowledge, but to make progress, which is maybe where you're stuck right now, you don't need a huge amount of information. You already know what it takes to initiate fat loss. You know that probably going to the gym consistently week after week is going to have some benefit for your long-term goal. You know these things already. You don't need me to reinforce those things. What you do need is some way, a mechanism of making it stick, of adhering, of changing habits. Behavior change is crucially important, often overlooked, because it's fucking difficult. It's not easy to change lifelong, well-established behaviors and patterns and routines and start to change all of those things for the better. That is always going to be difficult. So that's why people shy away from it. But the more you shy away from it, then the chances of you achieving your goal are going to start to diminish and diminish and diminish. So I would encourage you to try and just really spend some time thinking about the concepts that we've gone through in this podcast. Try and apply, sit down, create some time in your diary, 10 minutes every day or something like that, to reflect on what went kind of not according to plan. What were my thoughts? What were my feelings? What were the thoughts going in my head? Could I have hit the pause button? Could I have done something different? Think about all those things and start to try and incrementally improve each and every day. Because the more reps you put in, a bit like when you're going to the gym, you're putting the reps in, you're getting stronger. The same with your mindset and your habits as well. The more consistent you are, the more you're trying to change things, the more you're trying to be positive, then it will build up over time. Your mindset will get stronger, your behaviors will get stronger, and your ability to achieve your goal will get stronger as well. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode of the show. If you did, like I said right at the beginning, a little bit of a like and a subscribe on YouTube would be awesome. A little rating and a review on your podcast platform would be cool too. Plus, what I'll do is I'll put some links in the show notes below. So if you want some free resources that want to get you on a kickstart, basically on achieving maybe whatever it is, losing weight, building muscle, you can pick up a free training program, you can pick up a calorie and macro guide, and you can also get access to my free online calorie and macro calculator. So we can sort the nutrition stuff out, we can give you a free training program, but I really want you to focus in on those habits and that behavior change like we've gone through in this episode of the show. But for now, all that's left for me to say is thanks so much for listening, thanks so much for watching, keep living the lean life, and I'll see you for the next episode of the show.